Hello, friends. Hope you're all doing great. So today we are going to talk about a topic which I believe is important for all of us, irrespective of which profession you're in or what kind of work that you do. But this is going to be absolutely 100% important for all of us. And I'm going to talk to you about how do you give constructive feedback. Now, a lot of times we are in a position where as managers, as leaders, as parents, as counselors, or even as friends, we need to give feedback to other people. We need to tell them what is it that they're doing correct, what is it that needs to be changed. But in the absence of a proper framework, we really do not know how do we go about giving that constructive feedback. So I'm going to share with you a simple framework that will help you deliver feedback in the most practical manner and also ensure that you are able to bring about the desired behavior change. So here it is. It's called the EEC model or the EEC framework. What does it mean? So EEC stands for example, effect, and C stands for either change or continue. So I'll explain you what this means. So the first step is example. So a lot of times I've seen people when they start giving feedback, they say something like this. So, I would like to tell you that your behavior was not really that great in the last meeting that you attended. You need to probably change that. Now, do you see a problem with this? The problem here is, although I've spoken about something which is non-desirable, I haven't exactly told the other person what is the problem. And therefore, there is a lot of confusion in this. And it might also seem like it is biased because I'm only talking based on my feelings, my assumptions of the situation. Rather, we need to use example. So what is an example? An example will let the other person know what is it that you're trying to point out. This is how you may go about it. Hey, you remember the last meeting that we attended with a client? I think your behavior wasn't up to the mark. And to be honest with you, here is what I meant. I thought that when you were discussing things with the client, couple of occasions, your tonality was slightly harsh. And I don't think the client liked that. So perhaps the next time you might just want to watch out for that. Now I've used an example. The moment I use an example, it becomes easier for the other person to correlate with it. He or she can understand that, okay, this is the place where I made a mistake, or this is where the other person thinks I should have done better. So the moment you use an example, things are crystal clear. There is no room for doubt. And therefore, whenever you give feedback, rather than making just generic statements, use examples, and we all correlate with them beautifully. So step number one is to use examples while you're giving feedback. Step number two is to talk about the effect. Now let's go back to the same example that we started with, and let's see what effect is. Effect basically talks about the impact of the behavior that you observed. So for example, in this particular case, if you're giving feedback to someone for bad behavior during a client meeting, you would say something like this. So because you used a harsh tone while talking or having this conversation with the client, there is every possibility that the client will not want to engage in conversations with us, which predominantly would mean that he or she may not want to do business with us in the future. And that will have a huge business impact. So what you're talking about here is the impact, the effect of behavior displayed by the other person during the situation. How will that impact whatever we do with the client thereafter? So effect essentially talks about the effect of the behavior, which you've already spoken about in step one, which is example. So you're done with the example, you have spoken about the effect or the impact. Now, what is step number three? You want to change this. And that's why in step number three, we tell the other person what is the behavior that we want to actually see. What is the desired behavior? So in this particular case, you're going to talk about not just stopping the undesirable behavior, but you're also talking about what is the desired behavior. So you might go something like this. So instead of talking to the client in an aggressive fashion, in a harsh tonality, here is what you can do. You can be slightly more assertive in your demands. You can tell the client what is it that you agree with, what is it that you don't agree with, but don't ever get harsh while discussing or talking with the client. That is something which I want you to do consciously the next time around whenever you have a discussion with the client. You see what happened here? I'm asking specifically for what change in behavior am I anticipating? Now, all of this is fine if the desired behavior is not there. But what if the other person is already doing a great job and you're giving feedback to the other person? In that case, you're not going to talk about change. You're going to talk about continue. So what is continue? If you see that the behavior, the example that you shared is of a good behavior and you appreciate that, the effect of that is that the client is happy, the client wants to do more business with us. And therefore, instead of changing that behavior, you want the other person to continue with that behavior because it's a positive behavior. So change comes in when it's a negative behavior, but continue comes in when it's a positive behavior. You want the other person to continue with that kind of behavior. So fairly simple. EEC, the first step stands for an example. Rather than making generic statements, tell the other person what is it that you observed and elaborate on that. Step number 2 is you talk about the effect. What is the impact of that behavior on business, on people, etc., etc. And step number 3, if it's an undesired behavior, you talk about the necessary change that needs to be brought in. If it's a desired behavior, good behavior that is already being demonstrated, then you talk about what needs to be continued. So the next time around, you're giving constructive feedback to someone, focus on the EEC, the example, the effect, and the change or the continuation of behavior that you want to see. If you use this framework, there is a higher possibility that you'll be able to talk to the other person in exact terms, and it will be easier for the other person to grasp and therefore bring about the necessary shift in behavior. So go ahead and try this, and I'm sure it will help you get productive results. Thank you so much.